Thank you very much thank you, Lewis, for that moving tribute to member Birgit, who we will all remember today. Hello, as mentioned, my name is Graham Cairns and I am your Toastmaster of the day. We today have 3 formal presentations coming up and 3 evaluations plus a general evaluation. The reason that we only have 3 formal evaluations is that one of the speeches is going to be much longer than normal. And our first speech tonight is by Pamela Benjamin. Now, Pamela is presenting award-winning children's literature. This is a presentation mastery level 3 increasing knowledge speech. This used to be part of level 1, but has now been shifted to level 3. What's different about this presentation tonight is that it's being presented as a webinar with a question and answer session. There's been 30 minutes has been allocated to this presentation. Pamela, can I ask you what you want in terms of timing?
I would like the green at 20. I would like the yellow at 25, and I'd like the red at 30.
As it says on the agenda, just wanted to make sure of that. Thank you, Pamela. So, Mr. Timekeeper, where has Nick gone? Nick, you'll give indications at 20, 25, and 30, if you would. That would be good. Terrific. Thank you for that. In that case, ladies and gentlemen, with award-winning children's literature, please welcome Pamela Benjamin.
Award-winning children's literature. What does that mean to you? Is that an obscure prize given to an obscure author at a distant time, a long, long time ago? For me, it's really important because I teach reading to young children. And one of the objectives that I have when I'm teaching reading is to capture their hearts, not only their minds, but to capture their hearts. Because if I can capture their hearts, I know that I'm setting them on a path that they will love reading for their entire life. One of the ways I do that is with award-winning children's books. Now, there's a lot of different awards, and not every single outstanding author has received an award. But look at these authors' names. And in the chat, tell me what you think when you see those names. Ronald Dahl, Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel, J.R.R. Tolkien. Let me see some text in the chat there. E.B. White, Beatrice Potter, Engström, Lindström. What do you think when you see those words, those names? BDC said there's not all children's novels. Well, we could discuss that. They wrote for kids, but adults love them. That's right, Graham. Lou said fantasy, creativity. Was Dr. Seuss really for young children learning to read? Or did he have a larger message that really impacted generations of people? Today, I'd like to talk to you about award-winning and outstanding children's literature, because it is the power of a story. The power of a story which can change a person and can change different situations that they're in. When you read some of these stories that J.R.R. Tolkien told, that Dr. Seuss told, they still touch young children's heart today. They change the way that they see the world, whether they identify with to a little boy and a girl with a crazy person that comes to their house, or whether they identify with a little Bilbo Baggins. At the end of it, they say, I can change my world. And great stories change us. In the chat, I would like you to put the names of different children's stories that you read when you were young and how they impacted you. I know we have readers in the crowd here. So Andy said Beatrix Potter and Harry Potter, not related. Okay, true. They're not related. The Rats of Nim, very good, BDC. And why did you like The Rats of Nim? When did you read that? Did you read that as a child or did you read that as an adolescent? The Rats of Nim. Turn your mic on, BDC, please. Did you read that as a child or as an adolescent?
I read it as a third grader. It was
Third
very
grader.
weird, and that's what I appreciated about it.
Why was it weird?
Not a lot of the books really went after stuff like that. I felt like in the third grade.
I know, but why was it weird?
Because it approached the concept, the idea of these rats being like moral. Right?
They would dominate. They were really the dominators of the story, weren't they? They were the one creating the strategy, and the people were there to supply their needs. Yeah. And so it's interesting. It would flipped. Instead of the humans really controlling the world and getting rid of pest, the rats were the one who were the strategists. So it was a twist on how we usually see the rats. And Jim Barber said The Hobbit. Jim, when did you read The Hobbit? And how did it change you?
I was around 12 years old, something like that. And most of the reading, I was and still am a voracious reader, but most of the reading that I did at that time was, if it wasn't real life, it was at least based on real life. If it was fiction, it was nevertheless fiction that could have happened. And The Hobbit was just wonderful because it was the Harry Potter of its day. It was magical. It was something that it was described as though it was real life, but it wasn't. It was completely imaginary, and that was just wonderful. I love that.
What age did you say you read that at?
I was about 12 when I
12?
started. Mm-hmm.
How did you see things differently after you read J.R.R. Tolkien? You saw it became a construct for fiction, didn't it?
It did. It opened up possibilities that I had just never before imagined could be.
That's interesting because I have a lot of young students who, once they read J.R.R. Tolkien, it's very hard to get them started, but once they read J.R.R. Tolkien, it totally changes them. It changes their life. It just how they see different things, and they just become voracious readers, just voracious. And that's why this topic is so important. Andrew Burns said Star Trek. Star Trek, did you read that? I think that was a TV program, Andy. Oh, Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet. Okay. Was that fiction?
Yes.
Yes. It was fiction. I don't know that one. And David Carr, Encyclopedia Brown. Okay. Tell me about Encyclopedia Brown, David. I know about that. So tell me how you like.
So somebody, I think on Twitter, was posting about how this was actually, his parents must have been psychopaths to just turn him loose. And, dad would come home from the police academy or whatever it was and consult Encyclopedia Brown in the case. So Encyclopedia Brown had read all the encyclopedias. He had memorized things. He had a photographic memory. And it was because he was smart. That was his superpower. So that was pretty cool.
I think when children read it, the children I know, they go through Encyclopedia Brown books. They go from non-readers to just devouring Encyclopedia Brown. And he's able to go into every situation, whether someone's lost a cat or someone's lost a book, he's able to come and solve all these children's problems, which I think is very unique. And I've always wondered why children love that. So when parents talk to me about what they should read to get their child to read, read at a very young age, once they get to early chapter books, Encyclopedia Brown. There's something electric about it. I don't know what it is. I don't think the psychopath is what they're usually going for, but there's something very unique about him, and his superpower is that he's able to solve different people's problems. Graham Carr, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. What did you like about that? Was it the lion? Was it the children? Was
I
it the
gotta
witch
say-
that you were eating the English candy?
Well, yeah, I got to say, given that one of the characters had a predilection for Turkish delight, and that was almost certainly me, and he was the youngest child, which I was the youngest of four, I was able to put myself into the characters of the family and of Narnia. It wasn't till much later that I realized that it was, in fact, a proto-Christian propaganda, and I moved away from it, but at the time it was just the sheer adventurism, the world that was beyond what I knew, but that I could still play a part in the changing, that I could be a soldier for Aslan, that I could fight against the Wicked Witch, I could fight, that I could be a part of the adventure. And so that was probably one of my earliest chapter book experiences. I then moved on to science fiction, and particularly, as I think I mentioned in the chat, I was a huge fan of Heinlein juveniles, because they appealed to the boy in me and to the burgeoning interest in science. But most of all, and what you're talking about, children learning to read, the thing that I tried to encourage in my children, and with varying degrees of success, is that they can go anywhere or any when, they can be anyone by reading, that these are memories which other people are putting into our heads, and that's amazing.
It's incredible. Carl Walsh, I don't know that book, Stranger in a Strange Land, 2001. I don't know that. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is? Why would that be magical?
Yeah, there's 2001, which the movie was based on that book, and I loved it because it brought so many possibilities to mind at the end, but also the dangers of technology. And then Stranger in a Strange Land. It's again, it's kind of an adult book, because it really gets into tribalism, and it's the story of someone who was born on Mars and comes to Earth and is half and half, and they have to try to live in this very human earthbound world. Very interesting.
Thank you. What I found is that when children read, they start imagining themselves in different ways, whether they become a superhero, whether they become the princess, or they become the scallywag pirate. Who do they become? And why is this so intense, and why is it so powerful? Now, I've thought about this many, many times, and trying to figure out how these authors are able to craft these messages that pull us into these worlds, that help us imagine and give us such unique perspectives. And I really have never found a concrete answer for what makes an incredible, gripping story, and how the author is able to craft that. That's one of the mysteries for me of great children's literature. But there are some people who do define what great children's literature is. Now we have the Newbery Awards. Now, if you're not a part of literature, the Newbery Awards were named after a man in the UK. He had a British bookstore, and he sold children's literature. He created children's literature. It was at the turn of the century. This award is given by American librarians, and they vote for the Newbery Award winner each year. So there's an extensive list, and it goes back quite a long time. A lot of the books I look for are Newbery Award winners. And so some of the topics that they talk to are a little, they're not all juvenile topics, but it's done through such a way that you're looking at the situation through a child's eyes. And that's what some of my students really, really like. Several of my students, I have them going through Dr. Dolittle, and they love the unique voice of Dr. Dolittle. And then I also have them in some of the more current fiction, Newbery Award winners, whether it's Shiloh, who's coming from the South and he's got a little dog. And even though his English is so broken, they absolutely identify with the different characters. But going back to a Newbery Award winner, why are these books chosen? It's always something I've tried to really identify what causes a really great book. Their definition is for distinguished contribution to American literature for children. Distinguished. How do you define distinguished? I guess it's because it's unique from every single thing you've seen before. And so to be able to create a unique piece of work that really doesn't mimic anything else takes a storyteller to invest and write from a whole different perspective. And that's one of the things I really like about it. Now, there's another award winner, that is the Caldecott, and those are for picture books. And I don't use as many of those, but I would say very early young children, they are really drawn to the early picture books and even will hold on to those memories that go into their adulthood. And those images and those stories are some of the most powerful stories and images that they hold on to and they hold for values. But this idea here of a distinguished contribution. How would you define something like that? How would you define what a distinguished contribution would be in the area of fiction? Can I see some ideas in the chat? How you would define distinguished contribution? What would that be? I know we have a lasting impact on the reader. Good. What else would be distinguished contribution? Impactful impression. Moral underlying story. Right. Usually the stories have the underdog winning against all odds. Relevant over time. Thought-provoking. A lot of these stories deal with fiction and they have make-believe worlds. Not all of them, but most of them. And the author is able to create these worlds, these world-building exercises in the book. And as students or readers journey through them, these characters and the images and the places become real. One book that I'm going to speak about today is Bridge to Terabithia. How many have read Bridge to Terabithia? Raise your hands if you have. Rick Derling, it's the only one. Andy Burns read Bridge to Terabithia. Okay. So Bridge to Terabithia is when two worlds come together. There is a boy who's very creative. He lives in rural Virginia, I think it is. And then there's a girl who comes from the city and she moves out there because her parents want to get away from it all and they want to remove themselves from technology. So two very unlikely people come together. They become next door neighbors. And she loves to run and he loves to run, and they make friendship on the first day of school when she's able to outrun all the boys on the playground, where the girls are supposed to be on their side of the playground and the boys are on their side of the playground. So they make a bond, and eventually, because they both have different issues that they're dealing with, she's coming and left all of her friends, and he never fits in because he wants to be an artist when he grows up, and not many people support that. Well, the two of them create this world. They create a kingdom, and it's called the Bridge to Terabithia. And so they go to this kingdom, and then they practice being different characters. And the girl, who is very well read, she reads out. She has memorized different passages and she talks about it. And so she's doing the world building in a realistic fiction situation. She's doing the world building. She eventually gets a pet for Christmas, and they name him one of the characters from this certain novel. But the world building that they create takes on mythical proportions when they're able to talk and resolve problems that they're having with at school, whether it's the bully, whether it's a teacher, whether it's something else that's going on. This sets the backdrop for the entire novel, this make-believe world where they can go to and everything is going to be right. And when they leave that world, they're going to go and deal with the injustices of daily life, whether it's the mean teacher, whether it's the bully at the back of the school bus, or whether it's the boy's young sister who won't stop pestering and annoying him. And one of the characters that this young girl constantly references is this young man. Does anyone know who this is? The Chronicles of Lloyd Andrews, The Chronicles of Pydrain. This young man is if you will, a Bilbo Baggins. So if I say Bilbo Baggins, what does that mean? He is the underdog of the underdog, right? He is the guy who lives in the little cave who needs 4 or 5 meals a day. And he only cares about comfort in the world. And he really doesn't like anything that's too adventuresome. Well, this young man, he is the underdog. And so he's raised by these monks, and the monks, he keeps asking the monks, what's my identity? What's my identity? So they give this young man the identity. You're the assistant pig keeper. You're not the pig keeper, but you're the assistant pig keeper. And all through these books, this young man is the assistant pig keeper. And he rights the wrongs of this dark underworld of these different mythical beings, these magical witches that want to overtake the world. And through that mystical imagination, they're able to resolve their own challenges in the realistic fiction part of the book. So I want to ask you, how can reading help you? How can reading fiction help you? Well, reading not only improves imagination, but it increases muscle memory in the same way physical activity increases muscle memory. Research has shown that reading stimulates circuits in our brain. We know that though, don't we? But what about imagination? How does imagination help us? Well, you might be able to see things a little bit differently. You might be able to problem solve. Look at this. Reading fiction helps people develop empathy, theory of mind, and critical thinking. Who thought reading fiction would be able to give you those sorts of skills, wouldn't you? So when you think about reading and reading great books, it's not just the story. Here is a case by Harvard Review, and it says reading on literature is one of the best methods for building empathy and critical thinking skills. Who knew? So let me ask you, are children's books just for children? Classic children's literature will change you because it's the power of a story. Award-winning children's books. Get a copy and say it's for your grandchild and read it with them. That can be your cover. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pamela. That was an excellent webinar and an excellent presentation. And you and all of the other members have given me some more books to go and find, because I have so much time on my hands. Yes, but I'm going to read those. Bridge to Terabithia, for example. I've heard of the film, but I've never read the novel. And it sounds fascinating. I love young adult fiction rather than children's books, but they are all of a piece. So thank you for that. We'll get some evaluation of your presentation. Do you want, we have a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions for Pamela before she leaves the stage? If so, show of hands.
Does anyone want to show me their, talk about their favorite book and how it impacted them? YA, youth, young adult, or younger?
Well, I was
Because
thinking, I'm
go on.
sorry.
No, go.
I was thinking James and the Giant Peach. Those Roald Dahl books were wonderful. So, yeah, particularly because he wasn't afraid to kill off the wicked aunts. And I don't know. I don't know whether anybody actually gets killed, but they definitely get disgraced, dragged through the mud. It's sort of a young person's version of a Carl Hiaasen novel.
All right, we will move on because we do have 2 more speeches to go and then evaluations. But thank you again, Pamela, and I'll look forward to the evaluation of that presentation. But well done. What we just saw from Pamela, by the way, was a webinar. Now, it's a little longer than our webinar competition because our webinar competition is much shorter, 5 to 7 minutes, or 3 to 5 minutes, in fact, I think. But let's talk about webinars, what webinars are, why we do them, and why this club has a webinar contest. It's not an official Toastmasters contest, but it's something that we've held at this club and at VTMCon to provide a way of testing speaking and presentation skills specific to the online medium, as we saw today. Now, the deviser of the contest, if you like, was David Carr, and he's going to explain why the webinar contest was created, how it's evolved, and how you can participate. So for 5 to 7 minutes, with lights at 5, 6, and 7, please, Nick. Please make most welcome David Carr.
Thank you, Graham. And I just posted in the chat, once again, the link at which you can sign up for the webinar contest, which, by the way, will be 5 to 7 minutes. That's one of the ways that the contest has evolved over the years. We started out saying that would be 6 to 8, because if you're going to do a little mini webinar and you're trying to get some interaction with the audience, you might need more than 5 to 7 minutes. And then we decided to do it as part of VTMCon, and we were worried about using up too much time. So we tried 3 to 5 minutes. And we're coming back to sort of the standard Toastmasters speaking slot, 5 to 7. So that means that you can use it as a pathways project or whatever. You can get credit for it. We won't be doing evaluations in the context of our meeting next week, but you can have somebody evaluate you separately. But why do we do this contest at all? Because, as Graham says, it has no official standing. There is something that we used to do as a main club contest called the video speech contest. We just did that last week, but they've changed the rules. They've made it a little bit more awkward for some of us to participate. I won't get into all that, but one difference about the webinar contest is everybody from this club is eligible to compete if they would like to compete. The point of the webinar contest, and why we call it the webinar contest, is it's supposed to be something that explicitly tests your skills about giving a speech online. And so that means that you have some license to maybe use some special effects. Now, that's always a judgment call. Are the special effects that you use, or the virtual backgrounds, or the screen sharing, are they going to enhance, or are they going to detract from the message you're trying to get across? You want to make sure that they enhance. But we're also focusing on the challenge that is different, on the challenge of trying to use humor and not being able to hear people laugh. Now, we will have dispense with the idea that everybody has to turn off their cameras, so that if you keep gallery view on while you're giving your presentation, or even keep the little thumbnails in the corner of the screen, hopefully you'll be able to see that people are reacting to whatever jokes that you may have dropped in your speech. The rules are essentially the International Speech Contest rules with some tweaks. And the tweaks are really designed to bring out that challenge of, have you actually created engagement with your audience? How have you done that? given that you have a piece of glass and miles of internet, many kilometers in Graham's case, to between you and your audience, how are you going to reach through that screen and engage with them? And so as part of the judging criteria, the judges are going to look at whether you created some engagement. And there are multiple ways you can do that. Now, one of the things we do provide is we'll have a chat monitor, and the speaker is allowed to ask for help from the chat monitor. So you can be telling people during your speech, post questions in the chat if you have questions. And you don't have to be watching that the entire time, although you could manage it yourself if you want to. This is up to you. These are your judgment calls. But you can have the chat monitor come in and say, oh yes, David, you've gotten 3 questions. And there was something you said back there that somebody didn't quite understand. Can you clarify that? And that is the goodness. And so again, sometimes we talk about, you know, everybody's rules seem to be different about the chat. But in this contest, you can post while the speaker is speaking. In fact, you're encouraged to post while the speaker is speaking, questions, feedback, things that the chat monitor can relay at the end. So I am going to show you just a couple of things on screen. Now, one thing is we actually have been doing this since 2018. I had to look that up. So you should be seeing Carol Prahinsky, if I'm sharing the right screen, won our first mini webinar contest, and we had several others over the years. In fact, I think Carol won it twice. And then she decided to show mercy for some of the other members, and she was chair of the contest the next time around so that other people would have a chance. Sunny Fridge did a delightful presentation that revolved around a Family Feud theme, where she was getting interaction with the audience, and if you gave her the right response, it would go ding, 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 ding. She had some kind of animated thing that she had managed to gimmick up. So, you know, you don't have to use whiz-bang special effects, but you have license to it. So I posted the link to where you can sign up. If you look up at the top, it says, see this article for the contest format. And that will take you over to the VTMCon website, because we're building up to that. We have other online clubs who are also being encouraged to participate in this, and they're going to put forward their own champion. And so this lays out the criteria for it, and it talks a little bit about how it's conducted and what the format is for the scoring. And there's a printable sheet that judges can download as well. So I will be recruiting for judges, but first of all, we want to get some people to sign up to present at it. And also, you know, one of the ways we reimagined how contests will work is we do have, if you go over to contest.toastmos.org, we have the digital contest voting tools that we've set up as part of the Toastmos framework are available here. So they're available to clubs who don't necessarily have a WordPress powered website, but they can come in and sign up and use this. And what this does is it gives the judges a digital version of the ballot. And what we're doing is we're allowing the digital version of the ballots to help you do some of the math. So when you complete marking all your choices, it will rank the speakers according to the scores that you gave for each criteria. And you can choose who should be your top 3, because those are just guidelines. You still need to make your choices, type in your name as a digital signature, and submit this. And we have a digital vote counting tool so that as the chief judge, I can be sitting with the ballot counters, and the ballot counters might actually be a little bit bored if all this technology works properly. It's when it doesn't work properly that the ballot counters have to go out and contact people by other means. But the idea is that you can just watch the votes come in, and then when you have seen all the scores, then you know who won. So the webinar contest is a great challenge. It is a great opportunity to show your stuff, to show that you should be hired as a paid webinar presenter, that you should be the person that your company puts forward to dazzle folks online, and I hope you take advantage of it. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that. And I would love to be a contestant in the webinar contest next week. Unfortunately, I actually can't be here. Bummer, dude. Also, thanks to Nick Licani for the most creative use of a cat reading a book on military history that I have ever seen to indicate that the red time is up. On that subject, it would appear that the red light was on for longer than an extra 30 seconds, which means that David is not eligible for the Best Speaker Award for tonight, which means that it goes by default, not that it might not have already done so anyway, to Pamela Benjamin. Congratulations on winning the Best Speaker Award tonight, Pamela.
Don't we have one more speaker?
Well, it depends. Carolina has literally just arrived. I think she may have had a mistake with the change to daylight saving. I'm not entirely sure about that. Hello, Carolina, and welcome.
Hello, how are you? Did
Hey.
did you change your local time? Or
Yes, because of daylight saving, it's now an hour earlier.
oh,
Assuming that you're not in daylight saving or out of daylight saving. Yeah, so it's still 7:15 Eastern US time, but I gather that changed on the weekend. So it's, yeah. Anyway.
Saturday, we moved it forward. So it's now daylight savings time.
So whereabouts are you, Carolina? You're in...
I mean, what? Sorry?
Whereabouts are you? Whereabouts are you? You're in... What country are you
located?
in?
I'm in Chile. Here is 9:30 p.m.
Yeah, because Chile probably doesn't have daylight saving, where America does. Everything moved an hour forward for you. So yes. So in fact, are you ready to give your speech, or would you rather wait till next week?
Sorry, I'm completely lost. Are you finishing the meeting?
We
right
are
now?
We are just at the point where if you were going to be giving your speech, right now is when you would be giving it.
No, it's okay. Next meeting. Sorry, I thought that you were going to change the local time next week.
No, it was this
Monday.
week. Yeah, it was this week.
Sorry.
Yep, no, that's all right. I thought that might have been the case. That's why I sent you an email. All right, so
I just read an email from David, and I thought, oh, maybe this Monday was the local when you changed the local time. Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's no great dramas. We'll see it next week or the week after it may be. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Welcome along anyway. Good to see that
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
We have, in fact, according to my calculations, about 2 minutes to go to the general evaluator. I was going to ask for some table topics, but since we only have 2 minutes, Jim Barber was due to be an evaluator. Jim's obviously been prepared to be an evaluator. We can't have a meeting without Jim speaking. So Jim, I have a very brief table topic for you. Actually, I've got a couple for you and for a couple of other people. 1 minute only. I want you to tell me about a memory or recollection that you have of reading as a child.
Oh, wow. I loved to read. My father would read the Sunday comics to me, and then he taught me to read. And unfortunately, I had ended up reading the comics to my younger sister, which was not at all what I wanted to do, but that introduced me to reading. Also, my mother was a voracious reader. She loved reading murder mysteries, Agatha Christie murder mysteries. And so I got into those, even though I didn't understand a lot of what was going on. I read, of course, the Bugs Bunny books and things like that. But I think the first serious literature that I read was the Tarzan series. They're not regarded as good literature nowadays, but I liked Tarzan. I think because he was a real life superhero. I loved Superman, I loved the other Batman and the other, but they always had great capabilities that I couldn't relate to. Tarzan was just a plain ordinary Joe that got stranded in the jungle and did the best that he could. And I could relate to that. And so I really enjoyed relating to Tarzan. I related to story. I enjoyed Tarzan. That was my growing up book.
Terrific. Thanks for that. For you, Carl, tell me about an author that has had an amazing influence on you one way or the other. Again, for about 60 seconds would be good.
In college, I read The Lord of the Rings twice because it had two different effects on me. First, it brought home the horrors of World War II. Tolkien denies that it's about World War II. It's about World War II. But it also opened up the possibilities of magic in the world for me. It made it very, very real. And I've been watching for that magic ever since. And it's a wonderful thing. Back to you.
Thank you, Carl. A wonderful thing it is. The wonder about reading is that it gets ideas. It's thought transference from the author to us via the medium of dead trees, which is pretty amazing. Nick Licani, for 60 seconds, I want you to talk about an author that has had an influence on both your cultures, if you like. Rudyard Kipling, any impact that he had with you?
Absolutely. I can tell you a wonderful story about Rudyard Kipling. Not only the fact that he has great poems and stories. As my first public speaking class, I knew I had a problem. I couldn't speak in public. And I went to community college Tuesday nights for one term, and I was to read a poem. And I chose a passage out of If, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whereupon I delivered my passage, and everybody was looking at me. No, they were looking at me. My teacher told me, great, nicely read, but you're moving your right knee back and forth about a foot apart, like Elvis Presley. And everything above the waist was like Nelson's column, all stiff and regimented. She said, it's okay to be nervous. So when you're reading If by Rudyard Kipling, make sure that you move your toes. That way, nobody's ever going to know. Over to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
If you can be horribly nervous and only move your toes, then you can be a man, my son. Thank you, Nick. All right, one last table topic. Lee Sing, I'd like to ask you, tell me about a story from your culture. We've spoken about some great Western children's literature. Tell me about a story from your culture for about a minute, if you would be so kind.
Well, that's a great question. A story about our culture when I was children normally is those.
We lost Lee Sing. Is it just me, or is Lee Sing frozen for everyone? No,
Don't hear anything.
Frozen.
Yeah, I think we.
Everyone.
Yep. All right. In that case, it's a pity because I was really looking forward to hearing that, but we are out of time. So now let me hand control of the meeting to our general evaluator for the day. Here's Lou Brown. No, who's general evaluator? It is Lewis.
Yep, that's me. Yes, sir. Okay, very good. Folks, we have two awesome speeches that we will have two evaluations on. We're going to jump right into things. First off, evaluating Pamela Benjamin's speech, we have BDC. You are up, sir.
Thank you so much. Fellow Toastmasters, our non-existent guests, but specifically Pamela, thank you very much for your speech today, Pamela. She had a strong opening. She engaged us right from the get-go. She used a very good technique about making sure that we would be engaged by having us right at the beginning of her speech. She said, what are some examples? And then she got us to talk. And then that was good because it allowed us to feel like she had buy-in, like she listened to us and she cared about us. I mean, honestly, who remembered the book Mrs. Risby and the Rats of Nim? It's a sci-fi book from 1971 that was a mediocre movie in the 80s. Again, not the most popular thing, but she referenced it. She knew it. She knew what the plot lines were about it. It gave her a level of gravitas of experience. She was able to take the other books we talked about. Granted, most of them are pretty predictable books, but be able to weave them in and out of her speech the whole time. This gave her buy-in. It gave us buy-in to what she was talking about. I think the thing that was the most impressive, however, was the stuff that she had over here on the side of her frame, right? She had a great little pinkish little bar, and she had words and text and pictures and all that type of stuff. And it was just a great example of how do you do a presentation here in this Zoom box without saying, can I have control? Will somebody give me control so I can share my screen? I mean, this is what we should be teaching each other on how to do here. But there's opportunity for improvement, and I hate to do this to you, but there's this thing that's called the rule of thirds. Here's your frame. I've divided this into 9 equal quadrants. We have our left, center, and right. We have our top, our middle, and our bottom. This is a rule of photography, but it can be used very stringently here in the web presentation. Everything that you want to present needs to stay to the right of this line here. The reason why is because when the words come too far past this line, they start cramming up against your head. If you take yourself and just move yourself a little further over in the screen so that you can keep yourself over here on this line, you're not going to have the situation where we don't know, is that your hair or is this your black box over your text? Really, you had great visuals otherwise. Your eyes are right at that 2/3 line at the top, and I'd love to see that. This was a top-notch presentation. I hate to even break out the rule of thirds to tell you how you could do it better. I'm just glad I'm not competing against you in any speech contest that revolves giving a webinar anytime soon. Thank you so much for this. I look forward to hearing your next speech.
Thank you very much, BDC. We're going to move on to our next evaluator, evaluating Mr. David Carr, who is Rick Derling. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, David. I've got a lot of things to pack into a very short evaluation of this speech. First, thank you for presenting this topic. It really does help understanding the background behind this particular contest, particularly since I spend an awful lot of time in brick and mortar clubs, so was not entirely familiar with the whys and wherefores behind this. I want to compliment you on covering a ton of material, especially since you were doing this completely off the cuff, as you pointed out to me in chat. Even still, there are some things that I thought you did extremely well across the entire the entire speech, but there are a few things that I think would really help you develop your muscle memory when you're giving speeches. So let's start with some of the things I thought were really good. One of the things you did is you did use humorous expressions. I'm not sure that they necessarily hit the target, but they were fun things to hear, and that is part of humor. So you did that very, very well. You also did a lot of changing of your voice and things of that nature. So let's face it, you are definitely an accomplished speaker. So I'm going to move right into some things that I think would help you as you continue to do off-the-cuff speeches. Whether or not it's an off-the-cuff speech or a heavily prepared speech, having a good structure really does make a difference. And it is really easy to just riff into a whole series of things that are coming out of your mouth and out of your mind. It's real easy to do that. What's harder is to actually put a structure around it. So a possible structure here might have been to start off with the hows and whys, give us a little more insight into that, break into complimenting some of the previous winners, move into some of the characteristics of the contest and some of the details that you gave us. It would have made it a more of a top-down flow. It's something I think that you can play with just as something to improve off-the-cuff speaking. The second thing I want to offer to you is you have the ability with your facial, with everything that you do, to do really good body language. But when your face is filling the camera, which is what you were doing this time, it's extremely difficult to tell what this gesture might be. Step back from the camera, move the camera back. I know that takes a little bit of thinking ahead of time, but if you do that, then we can see you from the waist up perhaps, and the gestures all of a sudden will make sense to what you're trying to present. Again, I liked a lot of things in this speech because it really helped me coalesce my understanding of what this contest is all about. I just would like to see a few more things come through with organization and body language, etc. Thank you for the speech tonight.
Thank you, Toastmaster Durling. Wonderful evaluation. Mr. Timer, could you let us know if both of our evaluators qualified?
Both qualified. I'm putting times into the chat in the next 3 seconds.
Okay, I believe we don't have an official vote counter, so feel free to send me your vote for best evaluator, BDC, or Rick Durling.
I think everybody's saying that we all think both deserve to win, so.
Okay, I don't need to count, and we don't have a speaker slash evaluator slash topic speaker electronic form like we have for the contest, so that's great. Okay, we also don't have reports from any helpers, as we did not have any helpers. I actually did not have anything to share as far as my critique of the meeting too, because I'm like, everything runs so smoothly. We're a professional group. We always do so well with the handoffs, with the timing, with everything. It's really getting near impossible for me. You know, maybe my level of observation is less astute than other folks, but a little challenging for me. However, when Carolina showed up, it made me realize one thing we could do is to better inform our members, perhaps through an email, of things like this, time changes. So when we have, and I also understand that Australia will be coming up in about a month, maybe something like that. So obviously different countries change at different times. So it's important for us, not so much to stay abreast of all the other countries' changes, but for the states themselves. Maybe we could still do that because there'll be another, you know, maybe some folks didn't show up for that reason, or just to let them know that that's we're on the new time zone. And with that, we have about 8 minutes left. I guess turn control over to myself as president, unless Mr. Toastmaster of the day, you have any last thoughts to share?
Well, given that we've got another 7 minutes before we need to wrap up, and given that there were some people who did not speak, and I hate a meeting where people get away without having spoken, I've got a few more table topics to go. So Angela, you're next. I want you to tell us what's important about reading to you. 1 minute.
But like most of us in the room today, I love reading. I love reading for many reasons. One is that it creates images in my mind, and it takes me to locations that I've never been and probably never will go. The other thing I like about reading is it expands my vocabulary. It causes me to practice words that I'm not even sure what the meaning is, but I don't mind looking them up. And then finally, I love reading because I love to read to children. So I was really enjoying Pamela's presentation because they have such a vivid imagination, and it brings joy to my heart to watch them think about what I'm reading. Back to you.
Thank you, Angela. Now, Carolina, we've been talking about reading and its importance, particularly for children. But reading is not just for children. Reading is for adults. Reading is for everybody. What's your favorite genre of fiction? Again, for 1 minute or so.
To be honest, I don't read fiction. I like to read about psychology or strategy or history. In fact, my favorite author is Robert Greene. He, maybe you know him, is he writes about power, seduction, strategies for war, and he's my favorite author. I prefer to read things that can help me to lead with reality or with people, things like that. But movies maybe about fiction.
Fair enough. All right, terrific. Thanks, Carolina. Donna, we haven't heard from you tonight, have we? So tell me about a childhood story that's always stuck with you.
Always believe that there's no story that is really written for children. It's written by adults, and the story seems childlike, but there's so many things behind the story. One such story, it's not a book that I read, but I'm going to mention it, is King Julian. It's a cartoon on TV, and it reminds me all the time, and I tell adults, you need to watch that because of what it teaches behind the scene, whatever this little lemur does. But the one book that will always come to mind that I think of is Through the Looking Glass. I love Alice going through the looking glass because I think of, or the analogy that I make with it is the fact that we sometimes are really looking through a looking glass at life. Now, if we're not careful, things are going to be taken away. We're going to be caught up so much into things. You can even call social media the looking glass. We're going to be caught up into so many things that we don't even know whether we're in reality or fiction, by the way people are pulling us left and right to be considered right, to be considered like, to be considered being in the know. And when I look at what's happening in the world and looking at what Alice was talking about as she met these wonderful characters through the looking glass, I'm twiddly dumb and twiddly dumber. And as we meet them, how do we manage what they do with us? Are they really dumb, or are we being dumb in not understanding that when you are in, let us use now, Rome, you do as the Romans do. So when you're in that land, the looking glass, it's a whole different picture, but make sure you're on the right side of that looking glass.
Thank you, Donna.
Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, everybody. I know that Kim and Andrew and Marty haven't had a chance to speak tonight, and that is a pity, but life's tough and then you die. Time now to hand to our VPE to find out about next meeting. Andrew, anything you need to tell us?
Well, as David was talking about, we have several events taking place. And those events include the webinar session, the session on April 23rd. But I want to also point out that in this land of Zoom, you have the opportunity to travel around the world, sort of like Carmen Sandiego, and visit many other districts. And I can give you an example. In District 47, they announced that they're having workshops on writing a speech. A lot of the professional speakers here don't necessarily need that, but it's always good to see a foundational talk, and 47 is doing one of those. They're also doing a talk for those that are using Free Toast Host, for those that you haven't been able to get over to David's program, and a lot of people don't understand that, and they're having a full webinar on that as well. I'm just trying to point out that as I look around the districts, and you have 122 plus the undistricted clubs, there are plenty of opportunities to learn in depth a whole bunch of stuff. It's just a matter of browsing through the different districts and take a look at it.
Cool that.
Back to you, Graham.
All right, thank you for that. And finally, to close us out tonight, it's our time to return to our El Presidente, Lewis Brown.
Thank you, sir, and wonderful meeting tonight, folks. Thank you, Graham, for running the show. Appreciate that. Awesome speeches. Boy, 30 minutes. That's practically a keynote, if not a keynote. So Pamela, kudos to you for going that long. My goodness, I'd be needing water too, oftentimes throughout such a speech. Stick around for our post-meeting networking event if you would like to do so. I have no particular announcements. Mr. Byrne already made those announcements. Once again, the link to VTMCon to register is in the chat. And I'll just echo once more what Andy said. Please sign up to be a speaker.